Chapter 7. Kaeron had submerged under the heated waters of the, thankfully, empty, outdoor hot spring 5 minutes ago and had yet to come up for a breath. The memory of Lex's impaled back and her bloody cheek played, over and over in his head, like some kind of relentless nightmare. And what made it worse? Lex had seemed to have forgotten all about it. He had always been envious of his sister's ability to shrug off the bad stuff, living her life as if she hadn't experienced more than most people would ever at such a young age, and of course, he wouldn't want her to have to think about any of those bad things, but she could at least. He scratched his head like doing so could stop the frustration building up inside. He didn't know what he wanted from his sister. It wasn't like he was the biggest feelings person in the world, but he thought he had taught her that she could talk to him about anything. He would have ignored the sounds of the approaching person and continued to wallow in his misery if not for their footsteps having stopped so abruptly and their heartbeat picking up in speed as if surprised. Did they think he was dead or something? He almost laughed at the thought, as if he could be taken out by a bit of water. He had performed in the harshest of environments in high-stakes situations while under Drayfin's thumb. Assassination missions during a blizzard, stealing top-secret documents from high-security vaults, and the more unspeakable things that he had done that he definitely didn't want to think about right now. "You're either dead or a pervert." A female voice drifted down to him. He almost rolled his eyes at the generic scene playing out. He must have entered the women's side on accident. He really wasn't in the mood to try explaining the mix-up. He sighed, making air bubbles in the water that rose to the surface, and then reluctantly let himself rise as well, breaching the water and surfacing into the cool night air. Kaeron wiped his face with a single brush of his hand and opened his eyes, looking in her direction, and shot his notorious smile that had all manners of women swooning over him. He wasn't in the mood to argue, so he'd seduce instead, but the woman in front of him penetrated his perfected mask of arrogance, and he couldn't help but to stare longer than he would have normally. She was the most stunning person he had ever seen, and he had dated supermodels, TV stars, and Sierra Atrium, the princess of this country. She had smooth-looking dark brown skin, sensuous brown lips that didn't seem to have a lick of lipstick on them, eyes the color of a storm, and hair that reminded him of the moon being reflected on ocean waters. He almost bit his tongue off. What the fuck did that even mean? She was only wearing a towel, but it hugged her form, exposing just enough of her small, but in a good way, tits. She gave him a peony smile after he had been staring for at least 3 minutes. "I'm flattered, mister, but only a lover or a pervert would stare so long at a woman's exposed skin." She eyed him. "And seeing as I don't know you, that could only mean you're the latter. Is that true, mister? Are you a pervert?" His brain felt as if it had short-circuited, his normal retorts dying on his tongue, but he felt almost compelled to answer her. "Depends who you ask." She frowned at this. "You know this isn't the men's side?" "I did not. So now that you know?" He should go. He knew it, but his mouth moved on its own. "Now I've got a reason to stay." She went quiet for a moment, considering, before taking 2 steps forward and stopping at the edge of the spring. "Then at least sit. Standing like that. I can see all of you." He looked down, surprised to feel a hint of embarrassment. He wasn't an exhibitionist, and despite the popular beliefs of his sister, he did feel shame, but he was confident in his length and had never felt like hiding it while seducing a woman. Actually, the complete opposite. He had found there were benefits in not hiding it. He lowered himself back into the waters, watching her intently. Once she was satisfied with the sight, she slowly and methodically lowered herself to the edge, dipping her feet into the warm water. He noticed the half-exposed tattoo on her neck, the towel she was clutching covering the exposed half just a bit, but he had seen it before. She followed his gaze. "You're not from around here?" He shook his head slowly. "I'm only passing by." "Where are you headed?" "The Pumi Desert." She blinked. "Why would you ever go to a place like that?" He bit his lip. He had to get control over himself. Anybody could have knowledge of Lillian's bounty, and he knew plenty of pretty face assassins. She didn't seem to mind when he didn't answer. She just stood up and looked at him. "Do you mind?" "Of course." He turned his head, and he heard the towel hit the ground, followed by the sound of her entering the water. You can look now. He looked her way, vision hardly affected in the steam. Her breasts were mostly submerged, so he focused on her face. She had thrown her head back, eyes closed, completely relaxed as if he wasn't even there, naked and staring. A silence spread over them, and Kaeron wasn't sure how to break it when she finally put him out his misery and spoke. So, how are you enjoying our humble little town? No complaints so far. He lied. They didn't have a nightclub or a strip club, and it was tens of miles away from the nearest swimming hole, so there wasn't anywhere for him to party, but he wanted to keep the girl talking. She smiled, a slow and soft smile. You'll change your mind. I won't be here long enough for it to be a problem. Only a day or two before I'm on the road again. What do? If you don't mind me asking? He thought on it before answering. I'm hired arms. Are you on a job? He didn't answer. Can you kill anybody? His eyebrow rose but asked. You need somebody dead? What if I do? Depends on how much you're willing to pay. I've got 1 million Vorks coins saved up. He considered her for a moment, as if seeing her for the first time. She was composed, but he could swear he felt the intensity in her words, and something in her eyes made her jokes seem less like jokes. Are you serious? That peony smile that he had quickly determined to be a mask crafted just as well, if not better than his own, returned to her face. Of course not. Another silence fell upon them, but this time Kaeron was the one to break it. You're not afraid of me? Should I be? Yes. She chuckled at the confession and said, I'll keep that in mind. He liked that seemingly real laugh, and the real smile that followed, and the way she slightly crinkled her nose when she laughed. You have a nice laugh. You're too kind, she said with a smile. Anyone who doesn't think so, or doesn't think you're the most marvelous being on this planet, must be blind. Even in the heat, he could have sworn he saw her blush. If only everyone were as nice as you. I'm not being nice. She looked at him, and for the first time, she looked at him without that mask and the sadness there. He wanted, no needed, to get rid of it. You cannot fall for me, she said sternly. I know. You do. He nodded and said, You're not the first one I've seen. That mask returned as she touched her tattoo and asked, And what do you think? He shrugged. I think I can't fall for you, so I won't. She smiled at that. It was sad and quick, but it was a real smile. Hey, you want to get out of here? He asked. She examined him for a moment. Sure. If you had to compare yourself to one character from a TV show or movie, who would it be? The woman asked in front of him, back facing the way they were walking. Kaeron had left his car at the hot springs after declaring it warm enough to take a walk. He had no idea where they were going. The destination didn't really matter anyway. He had bought a big bottle of vodka from the nearby convenience store, and they had been passing it around in silence for the last 5 minutes. I don't watch anything but the news, he said frankly, taking a swig of the vodka and holding it out for her. She took it. I'd say you're the Karate Kid, she declared. Who? She smiled and took a sip. He's this kid who was being bullied, but in the face of his trials, he constantly got back up and fought back. Sounds boring to me, he said, taking back the bottle. I thought it inspiring, she said, looking up at the stars. Not many people can fight against fate and win. She dragged her gaze to him. I just think you're one of those types of people, you know? You've only just met me. It's impossible for you to know all that. She looked as if she were contemplating what he had said and shrugged. Sure, but I'd bet I'm right about you. I'm pretty good at reading people. God, he wanted to kiss her. And you? What character would you say you're most like, or whatever? Cinderella. Is that the one with the slipper? She nodded gravely. Sadly, yes, and this is my ball. All we're missing is a carriage, some glass slippers, and people to be outshined by my beauty. Kaeron didn't completely understand the reference, but he did understand her. He took a quick glance at her neck, where her tattoo was hidden by an expensive black scarf, and then drank before asking, Do you have any family? And the look that she gave him, so quick it was almost imperceptible before that mask was glued back onto her face, was filled with so much rage that Kaeron questioned if he had actually seen it. The only family I've ever known is my father, and he only cares about me when it benefits him to. They were twin souls. How about you?
She asked.
A misty silence fell over them as the memories of his childhood flashed by, as if they were being projected. I've never known my real dad. He started. My mom brought home man after man, all of which despised me and my little sister, and some would act on that impulse. He took a swig and continued. Sometimes it was a punch or a few. Some would burn me with cigarettes. Some would choke me until I passed out, all while my mom did nothing to stop it. He swallowed back the bile in his throat. But it never mattered. I could take it as long as none of them touched my sister. I could take it, or at least I thought I could, until one day one of the bastards she had been with, Rick, had found out I was stealing food from him to feed my sister. So he hit me a few times and then bent my index finger back until it broke, and I snapped. They had stopped moving, and Kaeron had fallen silent. What happened next? Kaeron looked at her. I ended the abuse. She didn't say anything to that, only nodded, took the bottle from him, sipped, and waited for him to continue. After, I ripped my sister out of my mother's pleading arms and we left. We lived on the streets for a few days, but that was when I realized I had a knack for weapons, and things took off from there. She smiled sadly after taking another sip and said, "Didn't think I'd meet somebody with a sad story that could top mine." He was shocked to find himself smiling at that. He was about to respond when a black, nondescript sedan pulled up beside them. The passenger side window rolled down slowly, and a basic-looking man in a black suit, with a white undershirt, greeted her with a scowl, completely ignoring Kaeron. "The boss was not happy to hear of your departure, my lady." He bit out. "I am sorry. Don't be. Just get in the car." Kaeron stepped up, making his presence known, and shot the man a warning look. The man cleared his throat and dropped the stare. "I mean, please hurry. The boss wants to talk to you. Give me a minute to say goodbye to my friend here." The man looked up at her as if he wanted to protest but sighed, nodding, and rolling up his window. He looked at her. She was smiling a soft, sad smile, but it was real. "I guess you'll have to finish this for the both of us," she said, extending the bottle of vodka to him. He looked at it for a moment and then took it. "This was fun. Thank you for showing me such a good time." He still said nothing. She smiled, reached up, and kissed him on the cheek. "Goodbye." He stood silently as he watched her get into the back seat of the sedan. He didn't say a word when it took off down the road, nor did he make a sound when it disappeared from view. He just stood there, looking in the direction of where it had vanished, before finally taking a swig of the vodka and began the trek back to the hot springs. Chapter 8. Kaeron was a worrying ass, and Lillian hated his face, and she hated the way he pretended not to hear her when she spoke, or his surprisingly well-thought-out argument to never enter any big cities or anywhere he considered not safe, or how he never wavers on anything unless Lex gets involved. So when Lex didn't back her up a week ago, Kaeron, being the big baby he is, got his way on the aforementioned problem, and she had spent that week contemplating suffocating Lex with a pillow, while everyone slept in Kaeron's uncomfortably small car. Thank Belial, the god of fortune and poetry, that on day 7 of their trek, they came across a small motel on the outskirts of a small town that they were avoiding on their way to one of the checkpoint zones, as Lex had taken to calling them. Checkpoint zones were cities or towns that they absolutely had to pass through in order to get to, and through the Pumi desert. The witch doctor that ran the motel might have been the sweetest person Lillian had ever talked to in her life, and that had put her in a good mood, but like it had been ever since she'd escaped, whenever she was happy she somehow got to thinking of Talion, and her day would be instantly ruined. Today it had been triggered by a dog. The motel they were staying in allowed pets as long as they were approved by the witch first, so when they were cut off by a fae with a big slobbering dog, she tried her best to play off how interested in the beast she really was. She had seen dogs before. Talion had a pair of mean-looking ones, but he never let her get close to them. He would laugh and say, "As a woman, how do I put this? You're nurturing and caring and kind. And if I had a female dog, maybe those qualities would be admirable, but I want my dogs to be killers, sweetie." And it just went downhill from there. All the times he had been drunk and pinned her to his bed, and she thought that this would be it. This would be when he finally had enough waiting and just took what he wanted. Or whenever she begged him to let her leave the compound for a few hours, and he'd get angry with her and yell at her, calling her names like ugly or ungrateful or slut. And if that didn't work, he'd lock her in her room until she broke down and begged him to let her out. So, as Kaeron prattled on about their individual duties while in the incoming city of Parthist, his annoyingly hot voice grating on her nerves, combining with the headache that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She had to fight back the flurry of insults she wanted to launch at him. She was trying and failing to dry her unruly hair. She had always hated her hair. It absorbed water like a sponge, making drying it a nightmare, but if she didn't wash it almost daily, it would be all greasy and gross, and it never wanted to stay fully straight no matter how many times she brushed it. Sometimes, she just wanted to cut it off, and to that effect, she'd sometimes just sit in the mirror for the longest time, a lock of her hair in hand, scissors at the ready to lop it off and keep going, but she had yet to ever go through with it. Hey Lily, while talks a lot over there, is checking in with his people in the underground. Why don't we sneak out of wherever he stashes us and go shopping? No, especially not after what happened at the gas station. Lillian hissed back. Lex rolled her eyes. Come on girl, if we let him, my brother will lock us up in every hotel or motel we stay at and never let us enjoy ourselves. Trust me, I've learned from experience, and think about it like this. Have you ever been shopping with no spending limit? Lillian's heart dropped, and she answered coldly. Whenever Talion took me shopping. A sad look of understanding hung on Lex's face, and she let out a quiet, "I'm sorry." Lillian waved her off. Kaeron cleared his throat. Are you two listening? Yes. Lillian said. No. Lex said simultaneously. Kaeron glared at her and bit out. Pay attention. Lex gave him a mock salute, and Kaeron rolled his eyes and continued. Lillian had finally finished drying her hair when Lex began speaking again. So, sad stuff aside, you down? I don't know. Okay, how about this? We go out and play this time, and next time we'll stay inside and be a bunch of old boring bitches. She said, adding puppy eyes and a, please Lily. Lillian let out an exhausted breath. She had never had a friend around her own age before, especially not a girlfriend, and she didn't want to let Lex down, and some new heels also wouldn't hurt. Okay. She half smiled, rolling her eyes as Lex squealed and pulled her into a hug. Thank you, Lily. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ahem. Kaeron was scowling, hands crossed and staring daggers at them. Sorry. They said in unison, giving him an innocent look. He mumbled something under his breath, probably something vulgar, and continued. I think I'm going to actually die if you don't put it in me. The witch doctor who ran the place cried in a breathy voice. Kaeron grabbed her by the neck, pinned her to the wall, and whispered in her ear, Did I tell you to talk? No, Daddy. He slapped her. So, why do I hear you? I'm sorry, Daddy. I'll do anything to make it up to you. He slowly raked his gaze over her body, taking in the sight. He deserved this for putting up with Lamb's constant complaining this last week. Kaeron didn't believe in the gods besides the god of death, but they had no name. They were just death, and Kaeron doubted that they had sent the blonde witch doctor to his door, panting on all fours, in some red and black lingerie, with nothing underneath, and a glamour that hid every one of her flaws. So it had to have been a gift from one of the gods he didn't believe in. He'd have to thank them for that later. She was the classic submissive type, or maybe Kaeron was just such an alpha that it brought out the submissive side from the women he fucked. Luckily, he always had rope on him. It was mostly for the job, but whenever he met a girl like this one, it had other uses. His eyes slid over her bound hands before finally looking at her face. She looked in his eyes, and he smacked her again. You're nothing more than a slut, and sluts don't get to look their master in the eyes. She whimpered, and he could actually feel how bad she wanted him. Not yet. Get on your knees. He commanded, letting go of her neck and stepping back. She did as she was told and slowly lowered herself to her knees. Kaeron unbuckled his belt and dropped his pants, then his underwear, where his partially erect cock hung, and he saw the very moment her gaze turned ravenous. "Suck it." She sprung into action, gathering as much of his cock as she could in her mouth and used her tongue to play with it before pushing it deep in her throat until she couldn't help but gag, spitting on it as she repeated the process. He loved how her tongue ring rubbed up against his dick. It was one of those things that made him lose his fucking mind, and if she continued toying with him like this, he'd fuck her sooner than he was planning on. She continued sucking like she was trying to save his life from a poisonous bite, and Kaeron saw red for a moment as he grabbed her by the hair and pushed down her head, her throat opening for him, trying to take him all in but failing. She started to gag and spit, so he let her go, but she didn't stop taking it deep, and he snapped, pulled his cock out her mouth, and snatched her up, drawing a giddy chuckle from her. He spun her around and bent her over until her ass was upright and positioned nicely for his cock. He smacked her bony ass, and she moaned. "Who does this ass belong to?" "You, daddy." He smacked it again, and she moaned louder. "It's mine? How about your boyfriend?" She looked back at him, surprised. "How do you know about him?" "Him who?" Kaeron growled low in his throat. "My boyfriend." "You mean the one that you're cheating on?" "Yes, my boyfriend, who I'm cheating on. How do you know about him?" "Bitch, who are you raising your voice to?" She flinched and dropped her head. The scent of her arousal was almost nauseating, and the fact that this was turning her on was absolutely despicable, and he had to wonder what it said about him that it was also turning him on. "I don't stick my dick in anyone I don't vet first." He hadn't even looked into her for sexy reasons. It was just a happy coincidence that he had already looked into her to make sure their stay here would be safe. He pressed the head of his cock against her entrance, but didn't let it enter her. "You want it?" "Yes." She was basically begging for it.
"Why?"
"What is it about me that makes you want to cheat on your boyfriend?" "Besides your enormous cock?" She laughed. "You looked dangerous and non-committal, like you'd break my heart if I fall for you." He smiled darkly. "Good answer." He thrust his full length inside her, and she gasped. He didn't stop. Grabbing a hold of her cherry red hair by the rubber band of her ponytail, he pulled her head back until she was looking into his eyes and put his other hand on her neck, setting a relentless rhythm of hard thrusts.
"God."
"Fuck me harder." "Oh God," she screamed. There were 8 other people in the motel counting Lex, him, and Lillian, so he knew he should tell the chick to shut the fuck up, but his cock was in control now, and his cock liked it when she shouted like that. He let go of her hair and neck and lifted her by her thighs and spread her legs as he bounced her up and down on his dick. "Fuck," he exclaimed, panting from the exertion. "I never been fuckly this." She slurred, panting like a dog. He turned and took the 4 steps to the bed and sat on it, still holding up and spreading her legs. "Bounce," he demanded. She complied, as flexible as a gymnast. This night couldn't get any better. She rode him like a pro. It was always the seemingly normal women that knew how to do some of the freakiest things that he enjoyed. He kissed her on the back of her shoulder gently. "I like it when you're sweet." He bit her and she giggled. "I'm not sweet. My mistake."
She giggled again.
That sobered him up. He lifted her off his cock and tossed her onto the bed. She looked up at him confused. "There's nothing funny about that. Don't think of me as being sweet or nice because I'm not," he growled. She flinched, and a flicker of fear showed in her eyes. Her scent changed, from aroused to confused and afraid. "I'm sorry, I don't know what I mean, I don't want this to ruin our night, Daddy. Can we please continue what we were doing?" He looked down at her until she looked away. Then he grabbed her by the chin in a quick move and forced her to look at him. She didn't dare speak, and he smiled. "Good girl." He kissed down her cheek, then her neck, to her breastbone, and all the way down until he was at her entrance. "Here's your reward." That smell of arousal was back, and he reveled in it. Chapter 9. Lillian purposely yawned loudly as Kaeron repeated himself for what seemed like the 15th time. He made a face at her that promised a slow and painful death, and she just smiled sweetly at him and wrapped her arm around Lex's. She had come to enjoy making him mad, not for any philosophical reason. Actually, she didn't really have a reason at all. She just liked doing it, but only if Lex was in the room, or he wouldn't hold back with the threats. He scowled and continued, "I will be gone for 2, maybe 3 hours, but no longer. Do not leave this room." "But what if the room is set on fire?" Lillian joked. "Burned to death." Kaeron said blandly, "I'm more than confident that Lex will be smart enough to get out." "I was joking," she mumbled. "Now, any more dumb questions? Or can I get going?" When nobody said anything, he turned from them and strode to the door only to be intercepted by Lex, who hugged him and buried her head into his back. "Be careful. Always, Lex," he said in the softest tone Lillian had ever heard from him. Lex shook her head against his back, slowly let go, and gave him a sad smile. He turned around, smiled down at her, and then kissed her on the forehead. "Don't leave this room," he said, the roughness returning to his voice as he opened the door and left. "The two of you are so cute," Lillian teased. "Shut up," Lex said playfully, pushing her. "You ready?" Lillian had spent the night before psyching herself up for this excursion, not because she wasn't excited. No, she was plenty excited. It was more because she couldn't get to sleep thanks to somebody who sounded suspiciously like the witch doctor who owned the motel they had stayed in, screaming their head off all night in sexual ecstasy. "Let's do it." "You mean the boy with the cartoon girl on his shirt over there?" Lillian asked, pointing towards the boy whom Lex was also pointing at. "He probably smells like sweat and poo. I think that I'll pass." Lex giggled. "I don't know, I think he looks cute in a boyish kind of way." Lillian rolled her eyes and pulled Lex forward. They had made sure Kaeron was gone before leaving, and decided to walk to the mall because it was only a 5-minute trek, and Lex wanted to leer at the sights and shops, and of course the men, and Lillian was happy to oblige. This was the first time Lillian had ever been in a big city without being under the supervision of Talion's lackeys, and she wanted to enjoy herself. The sun was blocked out by very big, very ominous black clouds, and Lillian prayed that it didn't rain. She was having fun, and they hadn't even stepped inside the mall yet. There was a spell that gave the mall the illusion of being surrounded by a forest so realistic. The sounds and sights of animals Lillian had never heard of and ones she had danced all around it. She was practically jumping out her skin at how interesting it all was, but she didn't show that to Lex because she'd just make fun of her as an awkward way to avoid the fact. A witch landed near them, and Lillian tensed as the witch dismounted her broom and began running up the 6 flights of bronze stairs. "You're okay. She doesn't want to sell you off like some kind of horse. You're okay, Lily." Lex was looking at her concerned. Lillian let out the breath she was apparently holding in and looked at Lex. Lillian had been feeling daring today with her choice of attire, but even wearing the coffee brown high-tube boots, the tight black leather skirt, the plain white t-shirt that hugged her chest, and the brown overcoat, all of which Lillian had picked out from Lex's collection of clothes, she still felt outshined by Lex. She was so mature, and Lillian couldn't help but be jealous. She was wearing a long flowing double-slit red dress that showed off her, frustratingly, perfect legs, some long red dress gloves, and eggshell white stilettos. She had curled her normally long, fiery red hair, and she had gone with a gorgeous glossy orange lipstick. Lillian forced a smile. "I'm fine, let's do this." She pulled on Lex's arm, but Lex hesitated for a moment before finally letting herself be led up the stairs, smiling and giggling, her infectious energy putting a genuine smile on Lillian's face, and Lillian even found herself returning Lex's giddiness. The inside of the mall felt perfect, as if it were set to the exact temperature she preferred, and thanks to Talion, she knew it was a spell that... She shook her head. "No, not today. I will not think about Tal. That man today." The buzz inside the mall felt as if it would swallow her whole. It wasn't even the fact that there was a bunch of people, because there weren't that many, but there was something in the air. Something was going on. Lex seemed to have read the interest on her face because she turned to the closest person and asked, "What's the big thing happening here today?" A petite half-fey woman looked at her as if she had spoken in the lost language of the ancient giants. The beauty boas are going to be putting on a show here in like 20 minutes. The lady said, checking her watch.
Uck.
The beauty boas, no thank you. Lex said, turning to Lillian. Come on, Lily, let's go check the stores. Oh, you're one of those. The lady said, rolling her eyes. What does that mean? Lex said, stepping up to the woman. Lex would easily win, Lillian thought. She had seen Lex spar with Kaeron a few times now, and she was a freak of nature. She was really quick on her feet, strong too. She was tall and had a ton of heart, while her opponent was as tall as Lillian, older than both of them, and clearly not trained in any fighting style. So Lillian decided to defuse whatever this was before somebody as in Lex's opponent, got hurt. She put herself in between Lex and the lady. Lex, chill out. Lex stuck her tongue out at the lady, turned and took a few steps towards a nearby store, but turned around before getting too far away and said, I hope Naomi can stop eating so much. She's been looking a little fat lately. Lillian didn't know if she should say damn because it felt like she should, but fuck it, why not? Damn. Fuck you. The woman said, flipping them the finger. What? You mean unlike your husband does to you? Because you have the fashion sense of a walrus? Lex said, flipping the lady both middle fingers, and finally returned to walking away. Lillian followed after as the lady started shouting after Lex, but she just ignored her, Lillian close behind. What was that about? I thought you were going to lose it on that woman. They had entered a store that had seemed to be selling bathing suits. Lex walked over to a rack and started thumbing through some of the more revealing pairs. I hate the beauty boas. They're a bunch of untalented, and I'm sorry to say this, but they're ugly and have no place modeling. She shrugged. Sorry, not sorry, but somebody had to say it. I'm all about young forever. That's a group that knows what they're doing. Lillian wasn't sure what to say. She didn't know anything about the beauty babes, or whatever their names were, so she opted to stay silent. Lex didn't even notice. And did you see that fake Lorraine Farwell jacket she was wearing? If you're broke, then just say that, like, for real. She laughed, moving to the next rack. Lillian faked a laugh and walked to the closest rack with the most modest options. What are you, a grandma? Lex snorted. Shut up, I just don't like looking like I'm easy.
Ouch.
Lex said, putting a hand on her heart. Lillian rolled her eyes. You know what I mean. It's just not my style. Yeah, well, I've never had a man come talk to me while looking like I live in an elderly home. Lillian stopped her search, tears stinging behind her eyes, but she refused to lose that battle. Fuck you, fine. I'll demean myself and my family for your amusement. See, was that too much to ask for? Lex mocked. Lillian took a deep breath before stomping over to a rack with a pair of bathing suits, one of which had some kind of tree design, and was so small she couldn't believe that it hid anything in the chest area but the nipples, and she felt exposed just looking at them. She flipped through a few before Lex declared, I'm gonna try these on, and floated over to an empty changing room. She was left with the silence of the room and the bored presence of the employees when a sharp pain attacked her stomach. It felt like 3 period cramps were striking simultaneously, or as if her insides were attempting to claw their way outside. She hunched over, making herself as small as she could, and tried but failed to stick her fist in her mouth to stop her tortured scream. What timing! A burning hot, golden light bubbled up to her chest, and she used her free hand to block the light that would paint the entire room the same gold. The lights in the room blinked on and off as electricity danced on her skin, asking, no more like begging, to sate her need for release, the light inside calling to her blood, singing a song of renewal and destruction. She could feel herself slipping away. It's okay, Zyla. Love of my life, sun to my moon, land to my ocean. Was she dreaming again? Those words were the same as they had always been, and Lillian could swear she was seeing the woman again, the one that visited her dreams almost every night. Her mother. The woman was facing Lillian, but she had no face, no face, no face, no face. Lillian tried to scream, tried to say something, but just like in her dreams, she couldn't speak. "It's okay, Zyla. Go back. It's not your time yet, my sunshine." Lillian blinked her eyes and was struck with whiplash. It were as if none of it had even happened. The pain in her chest was no longer there, nor was the light. The electricity was no longer dancing on her skin, but what really freaked her out was the fact that she was standing upright, hands to her side, and the employees were acting as if she hadn't just freaked out. "What do you think?" Lex asked, exiting the changing room in a green bikini. Wait, what?" Lillian stuttered. "I think you look good." They turned and were met with a grinning male employee who was looking Lex up and down. Lillian rolled her eyes. "Isn't there a rule or something against fraternizing with the customers?" Lex asked, eyeing him. He looked to be around Lex's age, but Lillian wasn't sure. His work outfit was baggy on him, and his grin was full of mischief. He was bad news. "I don't work here, babe. My dad owns this place. I'm here helping out, beautiful babes in bikinis. Couldn't get better than that." Lillian snorted. "Wow, you're so cool. Let's go, Lex." Lillian almost puked when she saw Lex playing with her hair. She couldn't actually like this moron. Sure, he was good-looking, but he was clearly an illiterate douche. "Lex, hold on, Mom." Lex mocked, taking a step towards the dude. "So, if you don't work here, what do you do?" "I'm a trap rapper. Have you ever heard of Darkgrim?"
No.
She giggled like a starstruck little girl. "Why do they call you that?" They had been moving closer and closer to each other, and were now standing face to face. She was taller, but for some reason she was making herself smaller than him. "Because I'm packing some dark in my pants." "It's probably because nobody has changed your diaper." Lillian mumbled to herself. "I bitch fuck is your problem," he said, whipping his face in her direction. "Excuse me?" The employees were now paying them full attention. "Don't call her a bitch, you clown-ass loser." Lex spat. He whipped his head back in Lex's direction. "Fuck you then, slut. You're ugly anyways." Lillian saw red, but before she could act, Lex slammed her fist into his nose so hard that he crumpled to the ground. "Oh shit." Somebody gasped. Lex picked up her discarded clothes, leaped over the man, ran over, and took Lillian's hand. "We have to go now." Lillian didn't argue, and quickly fell in step behind her, and she must have lost her mind somewhere between seeing but not seeing her mother and Lex getting hit on, because she was laughing. "I know this wasn't the mall adventure you were looking forward to, but I'm having fun," Lillian said, taking the steps two at a time as they ran down them. "You're crazy, girl." Lex laughed. As soon as they were off of the steps, they booked it, dipping in and out of back alleys until they came upon a dead end and stopped. They were breathing heavy and Lillian hunched over, hands over her head, but they were both laughing. "I think we're lost." Lex laughed. Of course they were. Chapter 10. The Cobalt. One of the dozen shitholes run by Axta the Bright, and yes, it is an ironic name for someone with as dark of a soul as Axta's. Axta built her reputation from buying politicians left and right, owning slaves who she claimed sold themselves to her, but she wasn't fooling anybody with her little worker bees. And yet she somehow got away with it. It probably helped that she was one of the seven. There weren't many laws that the seven couldn't break. They were horrifying creatures, with strength beyond imagination, and taking one down would lead to countless casualties, so unless it was something big, the authorities just let them be. The Cobalt, like her other shitholes, was a front, of course. Money laundering, drug dealing, auction blocks where anything could be bought or sold, but Kaeron wasn't here for any of that. He needed information. He had knocked out a vampire that had denied him their booth and was now scrolling through the texts he had received from his ex Brianna, who had somehow gotten his new phone number. Message 1. "I've changed my mind. I forgive you for cheating on me. I just
Didn't understand.
at the time that you had to do that in order to realize you love me." Message 2. "Why aren't you answering my texts or calls?
Are
You with that whore again?" Message 3.
I'm sorry.
For not being able to satisfy you. In bed. That's it, right? The reason you cheated?
I'll
Do better, I swear.
We
Should have a threesome. Just let me know you're getting these. Okay? He should tell her to stop texting him, especially after she blew up his old car, but he liked them crazy and she was fucking nuts. So he shot her a quick. I had to come out of pocket to buy a new car after you blew mine up, you stupid bitch. Text, and then put his phone on sleep mode as the person he was meeting finally entered the bar. A dwarf that went by Einzer the Rogue. Dwarves didn't have last names. Instead, they went by the title given to them by their father at the age of 13. Most of the dwarves Kaeron had met were arrogant little pricks, who acted as if the tallest of them weren't only 4 feet tall, and Einzer was not the exception. Actually, he was worse than most. Einzer met Karen's gaze and smiled. How's it going, you cheeky prick? He looked at the bartender. 2 beers. Kaeron clenched his fist. He and Einzer almost fought every time they met, thanks to that big mouth on Einzer, but Einzer was no idiot. He had many people in his ear, so if there was a secret or some kind of difficult information to obtain, he was the guy you went to, and he had allied himself with some very powerful people. So Kaeron couldn't just slit his throat and be done with him. That never stopped the fantasies, though. Einzer offered his hand for a handshake, and Kaeron didn't even acknowledge it. I need to know everything you know about the Pumi desert. Einzer pulled his hand back, swiped at the non-existent lint on his white t-shirt that was obviously too big for him, and sat. I had heard that you've been headed this way, but I didn't actually believe it until you called me yesterday. He looked at Kaeron, a hint of the deviant that was Einzer the Rogue showing. So, what would bring the infamous fire breather looking for information on one of the most dangerous places on Solaris? Kaeron shrugged. I've taken an interest in the sand dunes. The sand dunes, huh? It wouldn't have anything to do with the young brunette you picked up, would it?
Who?
Who indeed? Who is this mystery girl? I would love to know. Kaeron gave him a look that would wither a tree. I don't know who you're talking about, so I suggest you just answer my question. The bartender, a mean-looking older vamp woman with a few scars on her face, plopped 2 beers onto the table and headed back to her post all without a word. Einzer smiled. You always were a poor share. He took a drink of his beer. Fine, the Pumi Desert. It's hot, unbearably so, most of the time. Monsters, some of which are so ancient and mysterious that even I know nothing about them, rule the land, and the few towns that are still standing are run by lunatics and cannibals, and... Kaeron rolled his eyes. I'm not looking for the stuff that can be found on fucking Google. I need to know lore, like about the Arcane River, or what legend says about Itara. Einzer didn't even try to hide his surprise. Why are you asking about Itara? I just told you I need to know about lore. Einzer looked at him as if trying to read his mind, and then sighed. Supposedly, it was the birthplace of the first species to have roamed Solaris. Some of the researchers that survived that search for Itara a few years back swear they had seen glowing winged creatures who were whispering in their heads. Kaeron lifted a hand. Like telepathically? Is that even possible? The researchers were all fucked up when they came back from the expedition, seeing things, hearing voices. For all I know, the desert cracked them, and their testimonies were nothing more than the nonsense of crazy people. Kaeron loosed a breath. What had this girl gotten him into? Oh, Einzer snapped his finger. There is something you should know. He took a swig of his beer. Stay clear of the Dullahan. The what? Einzer looked at him as if he were dumb, until Kaeron scowled at him. That's when he began laughing, smacking the table with that heavy hand of his. You really should leave that dump of a town you stay at more often, fire breather. Kaeron's scowl turned into a growl, but Einzer continued. Legend says the Dullahan is the protector of Itara and all its secrets, but unlike Itara, the Dullahan is no myth. It's well known around those parts, and not even you stand a chance against it. Kaeron scoffed. Is that really all? What a waste of time and money, he said, dropping a small bag full of Vork's coins onto the table and standing to leave the same moment he got a text. You haven't even taken a sip of your beer. Kaeron took out his phone and checked it. from Lex. Need you to pick us up. We kind of got lost. He was going to throttle them. He picked up his leather black jacket and strode out the bar. Hey P, we need to get Lily a phone, Lex said, cheerful as always. Lillian admired Lex's fearlessness. After spending half an hour hunting them down at the taco place they had situated themselves at, Kaeron was seething and spent an hour lecturing the two of them, and just as she had done during the lecture, Lillian was keeping her mouth shut, too terrified to make Karen's mood any worse. Lex, on the other hand, had no fear fighting back against Karen's fury with her own, saying things like they were just having fun, or how they weren't a bunch of kids, so if they wanted to go out, they could go out, blah blah this and blah blah that. By the end of it, they were both out of breath. Kaeron had to take a walk, and Lex even had tears in her eyes. She apparently bounced back quick, however, because she was all smiles now. Kaeron, however, didn't seem to have his sister's ability to forgive and forget so easily. He flinched at the statement and growled, "Low fucking blow, Lex. And you really think I should do anything for either one of you after you ignored my one fucking rule?" She really didn't want them to start arguing again, especially not while she was stuck in the car with them. They were fifth in the line of cars waiting to be let over the massive bridge that connected Parthast to Lucian Forest. She had to do something quick or be trapped for God knows how long with these two yelling and screaming at each other. "So, did you learn anything from the guy you were supposed to meet up with?" Lillian asked. Kaeron shot her a look through the rear view mirror, and she flinched. "Yeah. Did you learn anything worth trapping us in that hotel room?" Lex. He warned.
What?
Can't even ask questions now. He scratched his head and loosed a breath. "I learned how shitty and dangerous of a place we're going. Oh wait, I already knew that. And I learned how much of an idiot I am for trusting you to be the voice of reason between the two of you. P, I don't know who's this little scared girl that you've got in your head, but it's not me. I can fight, you know that, and I had Lillian with me and she has 2 daggers in her boots. One for me and one for her. That's not the point, Lex. No, you're in the wrong here, mostly. I mean, if me and Lily hadn't got lost. That's besides the point, but P, you have to back off a bit. I know to be careful, but I want to also have fun, while also showing Lily a few things she had never seen before. Fine, whatever. You want to play dress up with Red Flag Girl back there? Go right ahead, but don't come crying to me when she drags you into something you can't get out of. Fine. Fine. Kaeron focused his attention on the slow progress of the last 3 cars in front of them, and Lex turned her attention to her phone. That's how it always went when the two of them fought. They would yell and scream, or sometimes the more frightening option, arguing in low tones. Whenever they did that, Lillian honestly thought one of them would hit the other. But they would always make up and go back to being the most disgustingly close siblings she had ever seen in her life. Not that she knew what it was like to have a sibling. A wave of sickness stabbed her. She had wondered her entire life if she had any siblings, or who her father was, or if she had any other family she didn't know about. An aunt, an uncle, a grandmother, a great-grandmother? She stuck her head out the window and inhaled for a long time, taking in the smell of her surroundings. The smell of fish assaulted her, followed by that type of fresh air that reminded her of good times. This was real. She was really on her way back home for the first time in years, and she was really escaping Tylon. This had been the second time today she had needed to reassure herself of it all. The first being right after Lex had punched that guy in the face. Kaeron mumbled something about her being like a dog under his breath, and instead of flipping him off, she just ignored him and checked out the structure that held the Parthas Travel Bureau. It looked as if it were a gate protecting some kind of Gothic castle. It loomed over them and absorbed the sun with its stones so black that no light could pass through. It was all solid until you got to the lower half, where it was hollowed out for passage, and on the inside for the office of the Travel Bureau staff. Lillian smiled to herself. Today had been the most normal she had ever felt. She owed Lex for that, and she just might start saying yes more often to Lex's adventures from now on, as long as they stopped getting caught. She really didn't want to have to deal with Karen's temper every time they went on a trip for underwear. They moved up a car length, and she sat back in her seat as Lex climbed into the back with her. "Polly's outie bitches?" Lex asked, holding out one half of her earbud. Again? How about Shatter Me's magic? She asked, taking the offering. You know about Shatter Me?
Yeah, my
Old friend got me hooked on them. Lex looked at her question in her eyes that Lillian really wanted to answer, and she wrestled around with the idea of doing just that, but Lex spoke first. Fine lady, magic it is. She's got the key to my heart, she's got the craze to my why, she's got the ghost in my eyes, and she's got magic, and she's got magic, and she's got... Chapter 11. Run, and find a place to hide. I'll come and find you.
Do not
show yourself, unless you are certain it's me, okay? Kaeron shouted over the thundering of bullets. I'm not leaving you, Lex cried, returning fire into the overgrowth. Yes, you are. He turned to Lamb, who was hiding behind the tree next to him, nursing her bloody arm. Lillian, if you care for Lex even half as much as you pretend you do, you will get her out of here now. She looked at him, and for a moment, he thought he saw concern in her eyes, rather than hurt like how she'd normally react after he insulted her. But that couldn't be right. He was a killing machine, born for this purpose, trained to be the ultimate weapon, a monster. She finally shook her head as Lex laid back behind the trees she was using to shield herself. Bullets whizzed by, and Kaeron gritted his teeth. If he could just get a lock on the location of the bastards shooting at them, he'd wipe them out, but they were good, and they had a ton of firepower. As soon as the shooting stops, Kaeron shouted, "What are you talking about?" Lex asked. Kaeron ignored her and began counting down. 3. His head was pounding, and he knew it was only the start. 2. His anger was beginning to overflow, boiling his blood until it turned to steam. 1. He was nothing more than a killer, and for putting Lex in danger, he would turn these bastards into a blood mist and then find their family and do it all over again. 0. The bullet stopped, and Kaeron kissed his dual Berettas before leaving his tree and began to fire at random.
Now,
he shouted, without turning back.
No.
Kaeron, let me go.
Please.
Kaeron. He shook it off. He couldn't let her shake his concentration. One of the bastards piqued him, and Kaeron quickly adjusted his aim. He knew there was no time to avoid the guy's shot. They had each other in their scope, and he just had to hope the guy was a bad shot.
Bang!
The forest was gorgeous in the red of the morning light, and yet Lillian and Lex giggled at the glare Kaeron gave them in the rear view mirror. There were possibly deer and other animals that Lillian had never seen before, being driven past by as they drove through the first forest she had ever visited, but her attention was 100% on Lex's phone. It had all started when Lillian was snooping through Lex's gallery and had come upon a picture of a younger Lex in a beautiful rose gold dress, standing next to some good-looking mystery guy, and Lillian had asked about the picture. This takes me back, Lex said, taking the phone from her, smiling at the screen. You remember Jaren, K? That's all it had taken to get that death glare of his. Kaeron has never been a fan of the men I've dated, Lex said, sticking her tongue out at him. Because you always pick guys who aren't worthy of you. He growled. She rolled her eyes. Nobody will ever be good enough in his eyes. Now you're getting it. So, why were you both dressed up so nice? Lillian asked. Was it a date night or something? It was prom night. Prom. Lex stopped looking at the phone and went silent, and Lillian watched her, confused about the sad look she was giving Kaeron. Kaeron sighed. Most non-kidnapped teenagers went to a school event called prom, where they danced and pretended that it wasn't all downhill from there, and if you don't know what school is, then... Fuck off, I know what school is. Lillian spat, looking out the window. I was homeschooled by some of the most intelligent people in the world. I could probably tell you things about Solaris that you wouldn't hear anywhere else in the world. So who cares if I don't know what a prom is? It sounds stupid anyways. Lex placed a hand on Lillian's. Hey Kay, stop here. What? Lillian and Kaeron exclaimed simultaneously. Lex met her look, a determined smile on her face. Lily, you're beautiful, and if it weren't for the actions of that bastard Talion, you would have been the showstopper of your prom. Lex laughed, cried. All the boys would have asked you to be their date. She took in a breath and smiled. And I might not be able to give you the entire prom experience, but I can at least ask you to a dance, if you'll take me, of course. Lillian couldn't help the heat that stung her cheeks, and thinking about how red they must be just made her blush more. You can't be serious?
Kaeron groaned.
We don't got time for this. Lex held up her hand, giving Lillian the choice to take it, and she really wanted to, more than she wanted to admit, but she had to say no. Kaeron was right, they didn't have time to waste. May I have this dance, Lillian Hearthstone? Lillian nodded yes before she could stop herself, and Lex's smile widened. Stop the car, Kay. He groaned loudly, but it was his only sign of protest as he pulled over to the side of the road. What were they doing? They needed to keep going, not dance around like a bunch of children, but as Lex dragged her from the car, butterflies played around in Lillian's stomach. There was somewhere inside of her that really wanted to do this. I hope you know this is a stupid idea, Kaeron asked, walking after them. Lex flipped him the middle finger and looked down at Lillian. Ignore him. He hates anything that isn't in benefit to him or what's in between his legs. Lillian giggled, and Lex returned it as they made their way deeper into the woods. With each step, Lillian felt herself loosening up bit by bit, and by the time they stopped in a small clearing, she was actually looking forward to getting started. You ready? Lex asked, taking her other hand. Lillian smiled and nodded her response. Hey Kay, can you hold my phone? Lex asked, scrolling through songs before finally landing on one. I was somebody else before you found me. I was losing myself before you saved me. Lex handed off the phone to Kaeron, who rolled his eyes but stepped out their way without comment. You want to lead or follow? Lillian asked. Lex raised an eyebrow.
What? Tal.
I mean, I was being groomed to be the perfect spouse for a rich overlord. Of course, dance was a part of my education for functions and any events that would require me to be able to dance. Good to know, so I won't have to take it slow. I'll lead. Lex said suddenly, pulling her close, putting a firm hand on her back. A tingle ran up Lillian's spine as they began. Lex started them slow, swaying for a few beats, then she picked up speed, moving them in a circle. Lillian couldn't help her giggle, and Lex's smile was unforgettable. She tried the first spin, and Lillian almost tripped over herself, but Lex's firm grip kept her upright. You okay? Lex asked, returning them to a slower rhythm. Yeah, the spin was always the most difficult part for me. Lex smiled. Close your eyes, and just trust me. Lillian hesitated, but closed her eyes. They moved in a circle for a few more steps. She started to spin, but something felt wrong. Her breathing quickened, and her heart sped up, and this time, not even Lex could stop her from falling to her knees. Kaeron huffed a laugh, and Lex bent down. What happened? She asked, helping her up. I don't. Get behind cover now, Kaeron shouted, pulling out his Berettas and firing into the woods in front of them. What's going on? Lillian asked, allowing Lex to pull her forward. Not sure, but when he says to jump, you jump. An intense pain shot down her arm, and she wanted to scream. She wanted to scream so bad, and her head pounded, but she couldn't distract Lex or Kaeron. They had to make it to cover. She split from Lex when they made it to the closest trees, and she examined the source of the pain. Blood poured from a hole in her shoulder. She had to stop the bleeding. With one hand, she pulled out the knife from her boot, cut a piece of the dress she was wearing, and tied it as tight as she could around the wound. It wasn't the ideal fix, but it was good enough for now. Kaeron had situated himself behind a tree nearby, and in the most movie scene way possible. He ejected his magazines, flipped his shirt to give him easy access to the backup magazines strapped to his body, and shoved 2 new ones inside his guns with ease. Run, and find a place to hide. I'll come and find you. Do not show yourself, unless you are certain it's me, okay? Kaeron shouted over the thundering of bullets. I'm not leaving you, Lex cried, standing, and with the pistol Lillian hadn't known, she was packing, returned fire. Yes, you are. Lillian was already losing feeling in her arm, and she was trying to flex her fingers when Kaeron turned to her. Lillian, if you care for Lex even half as much as you pretend you do, You will get her out of here now. She looked at him, a million thoughts racing through her head. She wanted to tell him to screw off. She wanted to ask him where would they go, but for reasons she was blaming on the massive blood loss. She wanted to ask what about him. They had no idea how many people they were up against, and even Kaeron had his limits, but she knew he was right. So she shook her head just as Lex laid back behind the trees she was using to shield herself. As soon as the shooting stops, Kaeron shouted, "What are you talking about?" Lex asked. Kaeron ignored her and began counting. Bullets were flying by on each side, and some hammered the back of the tree, but she couldn't hear them over the beating of her own heart.
Now,
He shouted, without turning back. Lillian darted for Lex, grabbed her by the arm, and used every last bit of her remaining strength to pull her forward.
no,
Kaeron, let me go.
please.
Kaeron. Lex was putting up a fight, and even on Lillian's best day, she was no match for Lex, unless she used that. But Lex would have questions that Lillian wouldn't answer, not again, but she couldn't get Lex to safety without it.
Bang.
She didn't have time for this. She'd deal with the consequences later. That familiar glow in her chest rushed to the surface, and instead of suppressing it, she allowed herself to drown in its warmth. Lex looked at her, a mixture of surprise and terror on her face lit up by the glow. Sorry, Lex. Lex's eyes widened even more, but before she could react, Lillian transferred enough electricity through her fingertips to knock Lex out. Lex slumped over into Lillian, who held her weight with ease thanks to the overwhelming strength now coursing through her veins. She checked Lex's pulse to make sure she hadn't killed her. It wasn't like she was a pro or anything when it came to output control of this power of hers, nor did she know how much electricity it took to simply knock someone out without frying their brain. But Lex's pulse was strong, and she was breathing. There was no time to celebrate, however. They were still in the middle of a battle zone. She tore off her rushed field dressing that had been supporting her arm. A buzzing of energy now replaced the numbness. It was no longer bleeding, and the hole in her shoulder had vanished, as if it were never there. Her mouth was flooded with the taste of honey, and a dizzying happiness snaked its way inside her, and she had to fight the urge to smile. She lifted Lex up with an unnerving amount of ease and ran deeper into the woods, leaving Kaeron behind, not even stopping to look back. Chapter 12. What are you crying about? That guy was obviously a loser, and you know it. Lex's mother, Lucian Deitas, was laughing as if Lex had said something funny. Mom, he worked for the government, he...
Exactly.
Marie took a breath. Even Kaeron says he's a loser. She got in close and whispered, You do know Kaeron's a wanted man, Lex.
Who?
Kaeron or all the men you dated when we were kids. That was before I got off, you know. Marie said, trying to use her sickness to garner sympathy from Lex. It had become their normal whenever they talked. Lex would try to call her mother out about all the shit she put her and Kaeron through as kids, and Marie would guilt her into changing the subject by using her sickness. It worked. Abraham was scared shitless when you pulled that knife on him. She laughed weakly.
Ja, Laislur.
Mom. Lex stared at her mom, who had begun looking at a spot on the floor intensely, and saliva started dripping down her mouth in little globs. Mom. Her mom spasmed, and then she snapped back to attention. Yeah, he almost pissed him. Self. She laughed as if nothing had happened. Lex tried to laugh it off, but her body must not have heard the command, because she just looked at her mom, and to her surprise, she felt angry. She had known that the effects of all the drugs her mom took would eventually start getting to her, but doing it now, when she had decided to be a mom again, when she was clean again, it felt as if her mom was trying to hurt her, to ruin her one final time, and Lex just wanted to scream and scream and scream until she didn't feel like this anymore. Lex? Oh, do you remember when I gave you that nickname? Now that was a day. Lex plastered a smile to her face. Kaeron was the first person to start calling me Lex. No, remember, me and Jessica, you remember my friend Jess. Jessica, SH, was the one who stole.
Stole.
She trailed off. Mom, what Lex? Oh, do you remember when I gave you that nickname? Lex forced her face to stay neutral. Yes, Mom, I remember. That was a day. Her mom laughed. Lex wanted to vomit.
Why?
Why couldn't you just be happy with us? Why weren't we ever good enough? Mom, did I do something wrong? Did Kaeron? You know he doesn't mean to. He just has a tough time fitting in.
Mom?
Her mom was gone, and with her went the shady apartment she was living in, and the smell of awfully made soup and cigarette smoke. Everything was stripped away, leaving nothing behind. She was falling. Why are you trying to save me? A familiar voice echoed in the black. Lex tried to scream, but no sound came out. Lex, why are you trying to save me? The voice spoke again. Why did it sound so familiar? Lex. Her eyes fluttered open, and she was met with a black figure looking down at her. Mom? Lex asked weakly. No, it's Lillian. Lex blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the darkness of the area. Here, let me help. Lillian said. The room was suddenly filled with a burst of bright light, and Lex had to throw her hands up, close her eyes, and look away so she wouldn't be blinded. Sorry about that. The light vanished, and Lex put her hands down and looked Lillian's way. She was playing with her hair, as if she had done nothing wrong. We need to talk, Lex said as the fog on her memory lifted. Are you sure? Lillian asked, refusing to meet her glare. Lex, however, was not having it and got in Lillian's face. Yes. Kaeron basically leapt down the slope he had run to after taking down his third with a well-timed grenade, but it was his last one, so bittersweet. They were a tight unit and had hardly any gaps, but even with his left arm being useless from the bastard who had caught him by surprise, he had so far been able to circumvent their defenses and slowly chip away at their numbers. Come on, Kaeron, you're good, I'll admit that, but without being able to shift. With that injury, there's no chance you can beat us, you know that, right? So much for friends. Kaeron scoffed. The leader of these bastards was a professional bounty hunter Kaeron knew, who was only known under the alias Dicer. Kaeron had worked with him a few times in the past, and he was one of Kaeron's very few connections for getting Kyrian. Or, at least he was. Now, he was trying to hunt Kaeron down like an injured dog, but what Dicer didn't know was for putting his sister in danger, Kaeron would move the world itself to end him and his team of cannon fodder, slowly and if possible, very, very painfully, even if he couldn't shift. He dropped to the dirt next to a bush and listened to his surroundings. It didn't matter how insignificant the sound, the rush of water from a nearby stream, the slight blow of the wind. Snap. He army crawled over to a nearby tree and rose inch by inch until he was able to check around the tree, but stay low. He aimed for the direction he had heard the noise, adjusting a bit for where he knew the guy would go, and fired 2 shots. He heard a thud and knew his shots had struck their mark. Damn it, Kaeron. Always so fucking stubborn. You can't keep this up forever. Thanks to your visit with a certain dwarf, I have 35 million reasons to just waste your time here and wait for my guys to find the girl and then disappear. He should have known Einzer wouldn't keep his fucking mouth shut. Yeah, but you know if you let me live, I'll wipe you and anyone you've ever loved off the face of the earth. Kaeron said, trying to hide the exhaustion that was creeping in. He had been running around nearly dodging bullets with a shot arm for who knows how long, and not even his training could stop him from feeling every grueling moment. Not with dear Lexi, as a hostage you won't. Kaeron stopped moving, stopped thinking, stopped breathing. And then he saw red. He ran out of his position, charging for the middle of the area he suspected them to be hiding. He was no longer Kaeron Deitas. He was rage, and he no longer wanted to kill these sons of a bitches. Fuck a bullet. He wanted to skin them alive and nail their fucking corpses to the fucking trees. A flicker of movement to his left had him adjusting where he was charging, and that's when shit hit the fan. Bullets whizzed by in all directions like mosquitoes, but it must not have been Kaeron's day to meet death, because somehow the shots were off by inches each time, and one even grazed his cheek. But Kaeron was an unstoppable force headed for his target. A smile twisted his face, and he ducked a bullet, only to pull out his dagger, as his target came into sight, and whatever they saw in Karen's eyes made them drop their gun. "What the fuck?" he exclaimed before Karen jammed the blade all the way to the hilt into the man's throat, and he started to choke on his own blood. With an impressive amount of force, Karen dragged it across his throat until he made it around its entirety, and blood sprayed out like a broken school water fountain. The bullets quieted, and something inside Karen bubbled to the surface, and he laughed. "Fuck this. He's a freak of fucking nature." Somebody squeaked. The sounds of his enemy retreating had Karen going feral. Were they crazy? The hunt had begun, and there was no stopping until he had killed everybody, or they killed him.
No.
"Stay in position, you idiots." Karen moved like the wind. Dicer had messed up letting him get a trace on his voice, and Karen was going to enjoy ripping him to shreds for it. It would almost make up for losing the runners. Almost. He darted straight for the tree in front of him, and he and Dicer's eyes met, and it was obvious that Dicer was shitting himself.
Good. Bang.
There was a new hole in his shot arm, but Karen pushed forwards. They would need more than a sniper if they wanted to stop him, especially one so obvious. Karen shoved his dagger in his mouth, pulled out one of his Berettas, and without looking the fucker's way, fired a single shot. He heard the bastard drop from the tree he was perched in, and he felt robbed. That was one less person he got to torture. Look, Karen, man, I was. I mean, it's just a job, you know, no hard feelings, Karen. Karen.
Man.
Listen to me. I was just kidding about the Lex thing, Karen. Who or what are you? Lillian averted her eyes from Lex's death glare. Lillian had never made Lex this angry before, but she could sense that Lex wanted to trust her, and Lillian would first betray that trust, then tell the truth about herself, and let everything that happened with Talion happen with them, because as selfish as it was. She liked Lex, and she had come to really tolerate Karen, and they were the closest people she had to call friends, and she couldn't bear to see that moment where the way they looked at her changed, and she becomes nothing more than a rare specimen to them. Come on, Lex, you knew from the beginning that I had secrets. Lex shook her head. Nope, that won't work. You are glowing, but you're supposed to be human. Humans don't glow. Lillian smiled, hoping Lex couldn't feel how nervous she really was. I'm better than I thought if I can fool a Deitas. What are you talking about? I mean, I knew I was good, but I didn't think I could. Earth to Lillian, what are you talking about? It was a parlor trick, my young detective. First of all, if you ever call me a young detective again, I'll tell Karen that he can start calling you small feet again. Point taken. And what do you mean? It was a parlor trick. She looked at Lillian with a skeptic stare. Lillian took a breath to steady her nerves and then spoke. The glow you saw was really from a flashlight, and I knocked you out using the stun gun that I had hidden up my sleeve. Lex examined her, disbelief written all across her face, but Lillian was a statue, not allowing even a hint of emotion to show on her face. You're lying. Lex rolled her eyes. You're such a bad liar. You try way too hard. So, what really happened in that forest, and don't say nothing because I swear to Vulcan Lily, I will march straight to Karen and tell him everything. No, I swear, I'm telling you the truth. Lillian said, pulling out a flashlight and a stun gun.
See.
The anger on Lex's face subsided for a moment, but it quickly returned. I don't believe you. For all I know, you could just conveniently have those two things, or maybe you frickin', I don't know, teleported or something. Lillian burst out laughing, and it wasn't an act. She couldn't help but imagine herself teleporting around like some kind of superhero. Maybe then she wouldn't have needed saving from Talion.
It's not
funny. Lex seethed. No, you're right, I'm sorry, but Lex, don't you think if I had abilities, especially an ability that actually allows for its user to move from one place to another, that I wouldn't have stayed caged to that monster for so long, or at all? Lex lowered her head. Okay, so you didn't teleport, but come on, Lily, I'm going crazy over here. What could be so bad that you can't tell me? I thought we were friends. Stop asking, stop asking, stop asking. Lex, drop it. I don't want to talk about it. Ever, okay. She flinched.
Fine.
Whatever. Ladies. Lillian's head shot towards the opening of the hollowed-out tree they were staying in, and there in the entrance stood a short, buff man in military camo green clothing from his head to his toes. He aimed his pistol at Lex. "Don't do anything dumb, or I'll have to do something unpleasant to your friend over there." Lillian's body locked. She had no choice. Even with a goddamn stun gun in her hand, she still couldn't do anything. That soul-crushing feeling of uselessness that she had been becoming close friends with, as of late, snaked up her spine. The sick sound of bone being sliced through like butter echoed in her head. The man's head went flying until it hit the wall and rolled in front of her. "Good job, Lamb. Next time. However, maybe stop making out with my sister long enough to make sure that the area is safe," Kaeron said, emerging from the shadows, and something about it reminded her of the first time they met, but this time, he was already covered in blood. A sickening thought almost knocked her to her knees. If Kaeron ever figured out what she was, he might not enslave her, nor even leave her. He might kill her.